Okay, hello, EVL205, Environmental Services Management. This is our week 12 lecture, which is a recorded asynchronous lecture. So, as always, I'm going to keep it like excruciatingly short. I just want to get to the bare bones of things and really keep it short and sweet so that you guys can tune in, tune out, and get on with your lives. I think that's always the best way when we're talking about like asynchronous online lectures, right? So if you recall, we did our assignment 2 presentations. You guys did an amazing job as usual, unsurprising. And then I wanted to get into volunteerism. And you said, thanks, Braden, but no thanks. Let's take that up next week. So no problem. We have some wiggle room in terms of our content delivery. So our week 11 lecture becomes our week 12 lecture. Okay. Um, and we're almost done, guys. We're basically in class one more time next week, week 13, and then week 14 will just be a take home exam. So let's get into it and get in and out of this as quick as possible. So we're talking about volunteer work in national parks, the types of things we need to do to keep these wonderful organizations afloat. There are minimal staff positions, opportunities. Funding is always such a scramble, right? Funding is so short, so tight. And so we really rely on passionate people like yourselves and myself, people who care, who are busy in our own right. We probably all have jobs or school or other things going on, but we're willing to make the time, right, to get out there and contribute to supporting national parks. So things like planting natives, removing invasives. It's hard to to pay an army of people to go out and do that. There just isn't that kind of budget in the park system, right? So training volunteers and getting them to go out and put in that blood, sweat, and tears, so important, right? Maintaining trails. We talked about trail maintenance last week. There's some staff that can do that on a regular basis, but you need extra help. You need extra hands to do that. So different ways to get the community involved that we'll talk about. But an important contribution is that volunteer effort, right? Monitoring for wildlife. That's more technical, isn't it? Like, isn't that something that you need some expertise in? Well, we'll see about that. Collecting data to help scientists do their research. Visitor assistance in education. In total, we're talking about millions of hours per year. That's some US data that I've got there, 7 million hours annually. Can you imagine for the US Park Service? They just wouldn't be able to deliver the same user experience without the important work that's being done by volunteers. So I encourage you, I challenge you in your life, in your world, get out there and volunteer, but even more importantly, drag your family along, drag some friends along, get people interested and involved, from students to retirees and everyone in between. Wonderful opportunities to get out and work for our parks, right? It's not only supporting biodiversity, but we get a lot of, as a researcher, I can tell you this, there's a lot of support and help that comes from the public, comes from volunteer work. And it also sort of engages folks, right? Gets people feeling like, hey, I'm contributing to this. I'm a part of this. I'm invested in this. Look at those volunteers hard at work in our photo there. Now, there's always a little, there's always some complexity to it, right? So people need to be properly trained. We need to let them know, how to do things in a way that is consistent, right? Especially when we're collecting data for science research. We need to do that in the way that the researchers intend it to be collected. Um, Even, would you believe, there's even funding limitations for volunteer programs. So someone's got to run that. Someone on the staff side needs to coordinate and direct volunteers. So that is a limiting factor sometimes as well, right? And so leveraging technology, like look at what we're doing right now. We're in a classroom, we're doing some teaching, some education, and we're doing it asynchronously. So developing tools like this to train volunteers then reduces the need to hire folks to or allocate people's hours to coordinating volunteers, right? So looking ahead, For sure, we're going to leverage AI. We're going to leverage, drones and GPS tools to help with data collection. We're still going to need some help from volunteers, but technology is going to help us with that, even organizing and planning volunteering activities. And so, I think we can leverage more with the help of technology. So this is a short video clip. I'm not going to play it in our recorded lecture. I have this link that is embedded in our PowerPoint, but I've also um, uh, uploaded the link to our week 12 unit in our Blackboard page. Okay, 4 or 5 minute video on the importance of volunteers in citizen science projects and research projects where we're really sort of using the help of the general public to get good scientific research done. So that is a required component for this week's unit. Okay, so take a look at that video. When you look at big famous park, maybe the most famous national park in the U.S., Yellowstone. One of the big sort of contentious issues was the reintroduction of wolves back in the 90s. There was a huge lobby that supported it, people saying, hey, this is an apex predator we need in this Yellowstone ecosystem. And then there's a huge contingent of stakeholders that were against it, right? You had ranchers and other like sort of local communities that saw, the downside of wolf reintroduction. And so a really important part of sort of communicating how the reintroduction is going, talking to the stakeholders, is doing the research, monitoring these populations, right? Monitoring meaning tracking them, keeping an eye on what are their movements, what are their use of habitat, what are their use of space in and around Yellowstone, right? So volunteers have been, really important part of tracking and like geolocating wolf activity throughout the park. And there's good training programs to get volunteers involved in that. So even in these sort of high leverage, high profile, scientific projects, you've got volunteers playing an important role. Science is for everyone, guys. Let's not forget that, right? Um, there's also a wonderful project going on at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I know I've got a couple American examples here, got some American data handy, but they've got this program called the All Taxa Biodiversity Inventory, ATBI, where they're literally looking through this amazing mountain range where this national park exists. In Appalachia, in the sort of eastern U.S., and they want to find everything that's there. So they're documenting everything, and it's incredible what they have found since they launched the project, including over 1,000 newly described species, not just new species to the area, but since 1998, 1,000 plus species that were not described in science, that were not known to science, have been uncovered as a result of the ATBI project. So really awesome project. I put the link in there where you can go read up a little bit about it. It's interesting to hear about, all the folks, the citizen scientists and the scientists collaborating together to get this incredible inventory, this accounting of all of the species in Smoky Mountains. Another really famous one that you guys may have heard of, the Christmas bird count, right? This takes place all throughout North America. There are 80,000 participants, probably more than that, really, across a number of different jurisdictions in Canada and the US. And they go out at Christmas time and record all the birds they observe in a given area. So it's become this like really long-term monitoring project, right? And think of the amazing stuff that you can now, the amazing story you can start to tell now when you've been collecting data like this for over 125 years, right? How is climate change affecting the distribution of species, right? Do you see this shift in, did they used to inhabit a certain area, now they're moving to a new area because the climate has shifted, right? What about numbers? Like what's we got a beautiful red cardinal there, right? So what are our cardinal populations doing? Well, you can track that over time, right? So you're covering this huge area over an incredibly long timeline, and you could never do that with the funding that one research project gets, right? There's no way. There'd never be enough money. But you get enough passionate people out there who care, who are interested and willing to learn about observing birds, and you get this incredible data set. So so much work gets published as a result of this. Scientists dig into that data set, do all kinds of different analysis, right? And they've got all kinds of really important environmental stories that have come out of it, including massive declines in bird populations throughout North America. And so, really important contribution to science that your average everyday bird lover is making by taking part in this Christmas bird count. And then same thing here, guys. This is video number 2 for you. I've only got 2 this week for you, in addition to this recording. This is another like 5-minute or so video. Just gives a little bit of context and background on the Christmas bird count. And in fact, I think the first video references the Christmas bird count too. Let's face it, it's the most famous citizen science project we got going on out there. So good thing for you to know about. Okay, some other things you likely know about. The role of applications in technology to help with wildlife ID and ultimately to help with citizen science and volunteer work, right? So the one that comes to mind often is iNaturalist. I get students using this all the time. Hey, what is that thing? I don't know. Let's pull out our phones and check it on iNaturalist. And it's a wonderful database of information, not always 100% accurate, but even when it's like sort of inconclusive, the app will call that out as well, right? So that's wonderful when the app can say, hey, it kind of looks like this. And so this is something where, we're just racking up millions, no, not millions, hundreds of millions of observations around the world. And another really cool tool for scientists, right? So you've got these geolocations tied to the photos. And so you can sort of document, hey, this thing hasn't been seen in this area in X amount of years. As a scientist, I might go check that out, right? So wonderful, super powerful tool involved in a big BioBlitz. That's another like sort of inventory taking project at Yellowstone Park. In one BioBlitz, they identified 1,500 species, 500 plus volunteers. Just an incredible, powerful tool. And so I've been talking about the US a lot, but in Canada, it's I would argue that much more important. We've got more open space, more green space, and fewer people and smaller budgets, right? And so volunteer efforts on our side of the border are crucial, totally critical to support and maintain wildlife monitoring projects, habitat improvement projects, and that sort of thing. There's a lot of opportunities available through Parks Canada. Not every organization allows it. So, like, for example, I was at the Toronto Zoo, and there's some students of mine that would love to volunteer at the Toronto Zoo. It's a unionized organization, though, and they just can't take on volunteers to do what's considered to be unionized work, right? So, where there are opportunities, within the parks or within some of our nonprofits, I really encourage you guys to get involved if you can. With the parks last year, it's 5,000 volunteers contributing, 32,000 hours. So a small fraction of what, happens in the US, but nevertheless, very important as well. We can't, you don't want to underestimate the economic impact either. We're always trying to convince, policymakers and, governments to support us and give us money. So let's talk about the economic equation, right? Understanding that, parks play an important role, important contribution to our GDP, right? It's something that generates money. It brings in tourists. $2.8 billion in recent years. We're probably sort of in that ballpark still. So, important, definitely important contribution to the economy, full-time jobs, tax revenues, and so on. There are also, and this is something you guys should check out, but there are also some youth programs. Not, not all are available to everyone. Some of them are sort of age limited. Some of them you got to be going back to school. Some are designed to support international students, others for domestic students. So you got to kind of look into it. But there's some funding out there for young folks that want to get involved with the parks, and it's a great place to kind of get some work experience. So check out Project Learning Tree Canada, Nature Canada, different organizations that hire young people. All right, folks. So that is all that I had for you today. Probably would have taken, an hour and a half to talk that through and break things down in class, but we did it in a fraction of that time. Just trying to be sort of mindful that people are busy, and yeah, and yeah, so we'll wrap it up there, folks. Thanks so much for your attention, and we will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.